Hello everyone. Today I will tell you about the unusual events in for hospitals. If you like it, please subscribe to us to bring you more exciting stories. I am a doctor. I have worked in many hospitals, but I feel like sharing an experience that happened when I was practicing. Before I got my full accreditation, I was sent to a hospital to earn my stripes, and this is what happened out there. A few weird and arguably spooky things have happened over the course of my career, but this one sticks out in my mind. Let me just explain a little about the layout of the hospital. The main building was basically shaped like a capital letter L. There was a newer part of the building which was just off of the L, just at the tip of the long side. The main building was really run down and old. The lights were usually out at night if they weren't broken. It wasn't a great place to be. The nurses' area was well lit. Just this long L shape wasn't so, as you might expect as a junior doctor on the night shift in a place which was ill-lit. Yes, I had my apprehensions and had to wrestle with some fear there. The nurses' station was well lit though, and that's where I chose to hang out, since I was on call. I sat there dreading the call, not because I didn't want to help or fulfill my Hippocratic oath, but because I hated venturing into the darkness alone. But one early morning during the infancy of my residency, I received the call. I think it came in at around 2 a.m. It was from a patient at the new building. But I knew to get to that new building I would have to pass through the L-shaped dark old building. As I mentioned before, I was scared of the dark, but more scared of the patients. The hospital that I was earning my stripes in was one for the mentally insane. Usually you wouldn't see patients unless you went in their specific rooms or into the isolation wards. Now I want to tell you that I was very careful each time I unlocked the door just in case there was a patient the other side of it. Since it was 2 a.m., I was reasonably confident that all but one patient who called would be in bed and asleep. So I checked that there was no one in the L-shaped building and began heading towards the main building to answer the call. All the doors in the building are sliding doors and they faced the hallway. I was a little nervous that one of them would slide open and I would be alone in the dark with a patient. I decided to walk as quickly as I could, so I could get to the new, brighter building as fast as I could. I had a long way to go and I was dreading it. Usually I'm not so jumpy, but for some reason that night I was. With every step that I took, I heard my heels echo in the hall. Then I heard another sound mixed in another set of footsteps. I stopped and then the footsteps stopped behind me after a step or two. Never in my life, before or after, has it felt like every strand of hair, but my body was standing on end. I decided to start walking quickly, but the second I did, I heard the footsteps behind me develop into a run. They'd be getting closer. I ran for a few meters and then stopped out of pure fear my legs wouldn't carry me. I was faced with a terrible dilemma to look back or not. I tried to push the notion of a ghostly spirit chasing me out of my mind. I had a duty of care. I pulled myself together for the sake of the patients, but I'll admit I was terrified of whatever had been chasing me. I looked back and there was no one there. That was enough. I panicked and scrambled for any available light source, but as I turned my back to run, I felt a sharp pull. Something had a hold of my lab coat and was pulling me back into the dark. I felt a new emotion. Anger had now replaced fear. I must have been struggling to get away for about 10 seconds. It could have been less before. I saw nothing when I turned back, but now I was certain I would, as I noticed something in my peripheral field of vision. I turned and I was faced with a very small, framed old lady. She couldn't have been taller than 130 to 140 centimeters. That's about 4'5" inches. It was a patient and thank God it was. I took her back to her room and asked her to go back to sleep. She was silent and complicit. I headed to the main building to answer that call. I continued to think about her, though I'm about 180 centimeters or 5'9" and she wasn't there when I looked back. I have no idea how she was eek up on me and where she hid when I turned around, not to mention the reason why she didn't want anything. Should I have heard a sliding door open? Maybe. Or was she just waiting for someone that whole time in the dark? It was silent in that hallway. It was very mysterious. I was too scared to go back through that hallway again that night, so I stayed in the newer ward. Since I was in a hospital, I chose to believe that it was a patient rather than something paranormal, but it's an experience I won't forget for it. 3 years ago, I was admitted to hospital with kidney stones. It was horrible. On the first day, I was pretty much okay during the daytime, but at night I felt pain like you wouldn't believe. It really was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. It got so bad that night. I was thinking of calling the nurse, but I thought I would try to endure it for as long as I possibly could. I thought that, if the stone passed, then the pain might go away. I had been there sweating, trying to enjoy this pain for about an hour. When the door opened, I thought to myself, during this hour, no patients came and went, so I guessed it might be a nurse doing the rounds. Oh great, maybe I'll get some painkillers, I thought. Not you. I heard a male voice softly mutter. It seemed like the owner of that voice was shuffling around in slippers. He was going around the beds. I was in a 6-bedroom and at night all the partition curtains were drawn. It sounded like this person was looking for something. As I heard him once again, mutter, not you, as he passed around the room, I started to feel sick and chills were shooting up my back. I was really suffering with this pain. I could see his silhouette through the partition curtains. I didn't want this guy to know that I was awake because then I would have to speak to him and because I was hurting. There was no way that I wanted to have a chit-chat. I laid my head on the pillow and closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, it was morning because I was new in the hospital. I felt like I didn't know the people in my room well enough to ask them about. Last night, like I said, I was in a 6-bedroom and everyone in there seemed to be in for various minor issues. I read the room and understood that it wasn't a particularly talkative bunch. No one wants to chat much if they're in pain. I guess after a day or two there was a change in the room. The guy who was next to me left and a new guy came in. New guy was a middle-aged man. He was more talkative than the others. We had a short conversation and he told me he was in hospital with gastric pain and he suspected that it was a stomach ulcer. I was still in pain with the descent of the stones into my bladder. It was getting really bad. Now the pain was back with a vengeance. It was night time when the pain got worse again. It was similar to that night. I heard the man walk around the ward. Then, just like clockwork, I had the same low male voice mutter, "Not you." What the hell was this guy doing in here again? I wondered. Then I heard him say something different for the first time. "You," he said. I heard his voice very close to my ear. They couldn't turn my body to face that direction due to the pain. I could only turn my head. Maybe it was more than pain. Come to think of it. Maybe it was some unknown fear that prevented me from moving. There was a man stood beside the bed next to me. I thought about that voice and I thought about the Grim Reaper. I managed to convince myself that the guy in the next bed would die soon. I don't know why these thoughts or premonitions entered my brain, but the next thing I did was even weirder. I tried to summon enough energy to throw open the partition curtains. I felt waves of panic wash over my mind. I didn't know what I was about to see. With the curtain now slightly pushed aside, I could see a man stood by the bed. He was wearing a white patient's gown. He was just a feeble and frail old man. I stared at him confused and dazed, and then he just shuffled his way out of the room. I thought that I was making a fuss out of nothing. I was ashamed that I allowed my imagination to run away with me. The next morning I passed the stone, and then in the afternoon the doctor told me that I was going to be discharged that day. That was a relief. The guy in the bed next to me was gone and I didn't know where he went. I was still kind of weirded out by the events of last night. Surely if there was a guy walking around at night, the patients or staff members must have known about it. But no one seemed to know what I was talking about when I asked before I left. And now that I was able to move, I decided to take a little walk to see if I could find the guy who was in the bed next to me. Something about him just lingered on my mind and I didn't like it. I wanted to settle my curiosity and I hoped that he was okay. I went and I asked the doctor about him. I found out that the man was now in the intensive care ward. He looked almost unconscious. He looked very thin and his face was almost expressionless. There was only a little pink left in his cheeks. I think that I escaped something unworldly in that hospital. Oh, Thorin. This happened over 20 years ago. There was a phase my friends and I went through where we would go on airs and little nightly adventures. It was a late summer night. I went with 3 other friends and we 4 would always get up to mischief together. The dare that night was to go into a famous abandoned hospital, which was about 20 minutes away by car. Actually, I had been to this hospital about 3 times before and I wasn't all that impressed or interested in going again. I mean, there was nothing but mountains and fields, as far as the eye could see, as it was in the countryside, and there were no girls there. So I was like, what's the point, guys? But they managed to convince me there wasn't that much else to do, and it might be fun. There were a bunch of rumors about the place. They say that it was originally a mental institution, that it was the largest abandoned hospital in all of Canada. They say that it's cursed, and there are even rumors about a secret basement. There were plenty of rumors like these, but now I'm older I realize that I didn't ever doubt the credibility of these rumors, unlike today. Back then, these rumors were spread by word of mouth and possibly by chainmail or text messages. We didn't have the internet to rely on. My friend drove. We took flashlights. It was really dark, since it was in the middle of nowhere. We walked a few minutes in the dark and the road widened a little and then we saw the hospital. It gave off a strange presence that night. It felt different. It was a 3-story building with a rooftop. This rooftop was said to be one of the most active spots for the paranormal activities. They say that something lingers there. Well, the first time I came to the hospital I thought it was pretty scary. But now it was the 3rd time and nothing had really happened the previous times I came. So I wasn't feeling creeped out or anything. It could have been because I was with 3 other guys too. We were passing through the overgrown bushes and thickets outside of the hospital ground, and that was when I came up with an idea. It wasn't really a dare if we all went as a group, I said to my friends. So I said, why don't we go up to the roof one by one and then, when you get up there, call the next person up. For the other guys, it was their first time, so I was hoping to see them get all freaked out. I thought it was a pretty decent idea. We played rock, scissors, paper to decide the order of who would go first, etc. I will refer to the friend who went first as a. From here on out, I started off through the busted-in entrance doors and we stood outside and watched. My 2 other friends were with me, joking around, saying things like, why don't we just leave him here and go home? And then we heard a shout from the rooftop. He got up there way faster than I expected. He must have sprinted. I looked up at her, and there were other silhouettes up there, with him waving down to us. What, there are other people here? I said aloud. As I said, the abandoned hospital had become kind of legendary, as there were still medical equipment and records scattered throughout the building. It felt like a hospital and at the same time it felt very abandoned. Does that make sense? I think this is why there were so many rumors about the place. So it was popular with the young people in our area, as well as people from outside the area. There were some who just wanted to see it from a tourist point of view too. I guess if you drove past it on a weekend, you could always see cars parked up there and people taking photos. I'm not sure if all these people went in, but it proved to be a very popular place. I said to my friend next to me, oh man, there are people here even on weekday nights. This ain't good, man. Then he was called to the roof, which only left me and 1 other friend. Then I heard my friends call out to my final friend. They shouted. I looked closer and there seemed to be even more people up there than before. I guessed that they were making friends. There looked to be about 10 people up there. It didn't seem fun if there was a whole gang of people there. I thought it was supposed to be spooky. While I was thinking this, I heard my friend, who was the last to leave my company, call out charming. Absolutely charming. Everyone on the reef seemed to be just pacing around restlessly. I headed into the entrance. There were walls scrawled with graffiti. I climbed the stairs to the roof. When I got to the top, I felt a blast of cold night air against my skin. And then I was shocked by something I could only see my 3 friends on the roof. I felt for sure that I was about to be P-ranked. But I decided to ask the obvious question, guys, were there others up here with you? We just looked at one another, puzzled for a while in silence. The wind blew and then suddenly we all heard the terrible voice calling. Someone started running and we all followed. We bolted down through the abandoned hospital through the gap in the fence. I took a look back at the roof and I swore I saw shadowy figures moving backwards and forwards on the roof. The wind carried that dreadful gnawing. Oh sound. We scrambled into the car and hightailed it out of there. We stopped at the closest light source, which happened to be a convenience store, and we never went back. This happened when I was working as a part-time cleaner in a hospital. I would clean at about midnight as there was less patients and doctors around. It was the working hours I was given, so I couldn't really complain one night. After all, my cleaning was done. I had put my equipment away and got in the elevator and headed for the ground floor. At that time there were no doctors, nurses or anyone around. It was really quiet. I couldn't hear or see any of the patients. I got in the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. Like always, except this time, despite me pressing the button for the ground floor, the elevator went down to the underground floors. I continued to press the button for the ground floor, but it was no good. The elevator finally stopped at the second basement floor. It was really weird. It never happened before. I didn't like this floor, especially not at night time, because all that was down here was the post-mortem examination rooms and the morgue who was calling the elevator down here at this time of night. I wondered I was the only night shift worker that night. Why would someone be messing with the elevator? Well, I got out of the elevator on this floor and I went to check to see if anyone had wandered down here. Then behind me, I heard the jolting sound of the elevator doors closing, which shocked me. The elevator started heading back up. Now I was down there alone. It was going non-stop to the highest floor in the building. I couldn't understand why, as there was nothing but a storeroom and a door which accesses the roof up there. It was off limits to the patients and only the cleaning staff, like me, had any business going up there. I caught the elevator back to the floor I was on. It finally arrived and the doors opened. There was no one in the elevator, but there was something wrong. I got in and I smelled something terrible. The elevator stank of copper. I recognized that smell and it was the smell of blood. It was inside the elevator, yet the elevator was clean. I couldn't bear being in that elevator. I had to get out and use the stairs on the floor above. I entered the stairwell. I was certain that someone was watching me. It felt as if someone was right behind me. I ran as fast as I could up those stairs, but I couldn't escape that feeling. I felt for sure that I wasn't alone, but every time I looked back I realized I was the only one on those stairs. I finished my shift and felt creeped out on the long walk home. But once I was home I felt a little better. I had work the next day and I was a little apprehensive. I saw some of my work colleagues and they were asking me if I heard the news about last night and I said I didn't know and asked what had happened. They said that someone had taken the elevator to the top floor and jumped. They said that the body was admitted to the morgue that night, last night. It was shocking to hear that I didn't really believe in anything paranormal, so I didn't make the connection to what happened the night before. I just got on with my work. The next day was a day off for me and I invited a friend over for a few drinks. He's a pretty strange guy to some. I guess he claims to have the second sight. You know, the ability to sense the presence of the dead. I thought that he might get a kick out of my little mysterious experience, so I told him what had happened. He listened carefully but began to fidget. I figured he just needed the toilet, so I ignored him. Then he suddenly shot to his feet saying I'm leaving. I asked him what the problem was. I said I had loads more booze and I needed his help to drink it all. He couldn't be convinced to stay there. I was annoyed at him, and instead of staying up and drinking alone, I decided to go to bed. I had a terrible nightmare that night. I was being forced into this small and confined area. Cold steel metal was all around me, and it was just so horrible. The next day I asked my friend what the problem was and why he left so abruptly. Get this. It gets really weird from here on, just letting you know. He said that while I was talking. For some reason he looked over towards my door and saw a woman peering at us through the gap in the letterbricks. You know, the mail slot. Well, we all know that there is no way someone can fit their head through a mail slot, right, where you have to have a really flat or mashed up head. I guess the thought lingered in my mind and made me feel quite sick. I didn't like looking at the mail slot after that. Could that poor person who jumped spirit follow me home from the morgue to my home and watch me through the mail slot? It was just too impossible to believe. I hoped that my friend was just messing with me. It wasn't a funny prank. If that was the case. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Well, I ended up moving away shortly after to get a better job, and things got better after that. It's a weird little tale I wanted to share. Thanks for listening.